I want to start off by asking you to think about someone in your life who's made a material, positive change in your life. I'm not talking about someone who helped you get that raise that you deserve anyway, or who offered to get your sandwich for you when they were already getting their own. I'm talking about someone whose actions changed the way that you think about things so profoundly that things were never quite the same again. Maybe they didn't even know they'd had such an impact, but they did know that they had the opportunity to help you realize something real and new and powerful within yourself, and they gave of themselves to help you along that journey. How do you feel about that person now? I know a lot of you are smiling. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you saw the opportunity to make a material, positive impact in someone's life and thought about that person, that gift? Has it ever occurred to you that not only did that person's actions change the trajectory of your life, but the mere fact that you experienced that generosity changed everything for you as well? For me, a situation like that happened early in my career. And though I didn't know it at the time, it was like dropping a pebble into a pond. And the ripple effects continue to spread to this day. I had just finished my MBA and I was working at a consulting firm called the Alford Group. The founder of the firm, Jimmy Alford, was a giant in the nonprofit industry in Chicago, had been for 30 years. He worked with some of the most impressive and biggest organizations around the country. My job was to help prepare Jimmy for meetings and presentations. It was a series of happy accidents and strokes of luck that led to me getting the job in the first place, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I jumped into that role with all of the gusto of a Labrador puppy who'd just been given her first chew toy. I researched, and I organized, and I drafted slide upon slide until I knew Jimmy had what he needed. And then one day, about 9 months or so into the job, Jimmy and I were riding an elevator up to a retreat that I'd prepared for him. And he looked at me and he said, "I think you should lead this one today." I almost dropped my giant Post-it notepads and my backup travel projector in shock, but I recovered. And I said, "Okay." And I did it. I grabbed that slide advancer from Jimmy's hand, and with shaking knees, I took my place at the front of that conference room. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you it was a knockout success, but I can tell you that at one point, maybe around slide 5 or so, my knees stopped shaking. And that combination of terror and nervousness and adrenaline started to light me up inside. Even in that first retreat, I intuited that there was something powerful and unique that I could bring to that board and to that discussion. And from then on out, I was on a path to hone that skill in order to build the career I wanted and have the impact I strive to have in the world through my work. And every time I get up to make a presentation or to lead my organizations through some tough, tricky process, I think about the fact that Jimmy made a choice that day, and one that was not without risk to his reputation, to his company's reputation. To let this overzealous kid know that he believed in her ability to succeed, in my ability to succeed. There was generosity in that act, and it has absolutely changed who I am as an employee, as a leader, as a citizen. Jimmy's actions, his unreasonable generosity, impacted me in ways that he could have never imagined. And that term, unreasonable generosity, it may not seem quite right to you, and I get that. It's not unreasonable to take a chance on a promising emerging leader. But when I say unreasonable generosity, I'm not saying that I don't think I was worthy of that opportunity, or that Jimmy's actions were some sort of charity. What I'm saying is that it is objectively a little bit crazy to hand over a big public presentation to a kid 9 months into her career, when he knew darn well he could have done it better. But it wasn't reason that was driving Jimmy's decision-making that day. It was the belief in a future that he could help to create. But he knew that in order to do that, he had to take a leap of faith a little earlier than was objectively reasonable. Unreasonable generosity. Now let's fast forward 9 years or so to 2015. Life has brought me back to St. Louis, but my work is still based in Washington, D.C. I'm talking to a friend one day about how I want to have an impact on my hometown of St. Louis. And she mentions this organization called Arch Grants. They're looking for a new executive director. I do a little bit of research, and I learned that this organization runs a competition every year where they give over $1 million in grants to early stage companies to help them grow and scale in St. Louis. The scale was impressive, and the idea of giving grants, not loans, not equity investments, but grants to early stage companies was intriguing enough that it piqued my interest. So I applied. And as I went further and further into the interview process, I became more and more intrigued. This concept was both something that was completely foreign to me and something that was strangely familiar. And then it dawned on me. This was unreasonable generosity at scale. $50,000 grants to the founders of unproven early stage companies, and then a host of support from then on out. It felt kind of like one big version of my elevator ride, complete with a, I think you've got this. By this time, I'd spent a lot of time thinking about the impact that Jimmy had had on me in my life, not just my career, but in how I thought about unreasonable generosity. And I couldn't help but wonder what could happen in a community if this same gift were given to dozens of visionary, passionate, emerging leaders year after year. If we drop tiny pebbles into the pond day after day, year after year, as the ripple effects spread and interact with one another, can we potentially transform the entire pond? 5 years into leading this organization, I cannot unequivocally answer that question. But what I can say is that there are some pretty strong indicators that there may be something here. Here's why. Of the 200 plus companies that we've funded at Arch Grants, about 70% are still operating. And over 85% of those are still operating right here in St. Louis. They've generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and created thousands of jobs right here in this region. And the founders of these companies aren't just building their businesses here. They're getting involved in our local government. They're supporting and joining boards of our nonprofits. They're buying real estate. They're building networks. They're building families. They're building their lives. And while these are all great economic indicators, I think the real value of unreasonable generosity is a bit more nuanced and something we're just starting to be able to track. It's in how these founders treat their employees, how they build their company culture, how they see themselves as part of a community and not just an economy. It's in the fact that Mark, the CEO from Balto, made a transformational relationship with an investor out in LA, and then turned around and introduced that investor to 12 other startups right here in St. Louis so that they could develop that relationship. And it's in the fact that Tyler and his team at Less Annoying CRM decided that the lack of diversity in tech talent needed intentional upstream interventions. And so as a 4-year-old company, they developed a paid internship program to help underrepresented and non-traditional students who were interested in coding get the skills they needed to be hireable immediately after graduating. Maybe it was by Less Annoying CRM, maybe it was by another company, it didn't matter. And it's in the fact that over 50% of the founders of the companies we've funded at Arch Grants have since contributed financially to our mission so that the next generation of too early stage founders gets the same chance they got. And these people who have experienced unreasonable generosity from a community that believes in their ability to succeed, sometimes even before they do, these people will be the next CEOs and corporate execs and investors in this region. And while we've all heard inspiring stories of a CEO or a corporate exec prioritizing people over profits, those stories still remain the exception and not the norm. What I'm talking about here is an option to potentially not leave that exclusively to chance. Unreasonable generosity at scale, with the express purpose of not just building a regional economy, but transforming it. Another example of this phenomenon is the MacArthur Fellows Program, where they give $600,000 grants to both inspire and celebrate the creative potential of individuals. They tell passionate, creative, brilliant people, we believe that your genius can have a profound impact on the world, and we want to see where it goes. And time again, the people who receive these grants exceed all expectations as they go further, faster than they would have otherwise been able to do. There are myriad examples of this, and I challenge us all not to think of these as interesting pilots or one-off models, but as a potential paradigm shift. One in which unreasonable generosity, be it philanthropy, encouragement, investment, forgiveness, is seen not just as a gift, but as a tool that can create a chain reaction. And if this tool is utilized intentionally and at scale, it has the potential to shift our communities and our global community towards something better. And while this grandiose vision of a more generous global community relies on scale, it all starts with people investing in people and doing it boldly and doing it early and doing it confidently. And so now I want you to think back of that person, again, that you thought about a few minutes ago who impacted your life. And I want to challenge you to think about someone in your life for whom you can be that person. And next time you get that opportunity, take it. Because ultimately, there is nothing more powerful than telling a passionate, emerging leader, I trust you, I believe in you, and we're counting on you. Extraordinary people, unreasonable generosity, repeated over and over and over again. I think that this idea has the potential to not just transform sectors and industries and communities, but eventually to shift the world towards something better.